The bells of New Avalon rang across the great city, their echoes carrying through the streets and rising up into the towers of the royal palace. The people had gathered in excitement, for the queen had made an announcement that none had expected. Queen Eleanor, wise and strong, had chosen to take a groom. The news spread through the markets and the gardens, leaving both joy and confusion behind. For many had expected the queen to marry a noble knight or a warrior lord. Yet her choice was a quiet man named Daniel Ward. Daniel was not known for his strength in battle or for grand deeds of courage. He had been raised among books and knowledge, spending most of his days studying history, science, and the mysteries of the world. He walked with calm steps and spoke with kindness, yet many in the court looked at him with doubt. How could such a man be worthy of the queen? The question lingered in every whisper and in every hall. On the day he was first brought before the court, the grand hall was filled with noblemen, guards, and advisors. Their polished armor and proud faces showed both suspicion and pride. Queen Eleanor stood at the front of the hall, her crown shining in the light, her eyes calm and steady. She announced with a firm voice that Daniel would be her chosen groom. The crowd shifted with unease and murmurs spread like fire, yet the queen did not waver. Daniel bowed deeply to her, his voice steady, though quiet as he promised his loyalty in his heart. The queen's gaze softened, but around them, many exchanged doubtful looks. To them he was only a common man, one who could not lead an army or defend the throne against the dangers that loomed beyond the walls of New Avalon. In the days that followed, the palace seemed alive with whispers. The knights spoke in secret corners, saying that the queen needed a man of steel and sword, not a man of books. Even the servants, who carried food and lit the lamps in the hallways, shared doubts when they thought no one was listening. Daniel, however, walked through the palace with quiet dignity. He listened, he observed, and he kept his thoughts close to his heart. Queen Eleanor spent her evenings in council with Daniel, asking him questions about history and the future. He spoke of balance, of wisdom, of strength that did not always come from the edge of a blade. She listened, her mind open, and though she was a ruler, used to the weight of command, she found something steady and unshaken in Daniel's calm presence. Still, the unease grew. Beyond the borders of New Avalon, news carried of strange machines that moved with power beyond the knowledge of men. Villages far from the city told of iron beasts that marched with fire in their cores. Fear spread in the hearts of the people, and the court grew restless. Some believed the kingdom would soon face an enemy no sword could break. And in those quiet fears, more doubt fell upon Daniel. How could a man with no weapon stand against such a storm? Yet Daniel did not argue with them, did not boast or try to prove himself. He waited, silent and patient, as though he carried a secret that none could see. When asked why he did not answer the doubts of the people, he only gave a small smile and said that the truth would reveal itself when the time was right. Queen Eleanor, though pressed by her advisors to reconsider, held firm in her choice. She declared to her council that Daniel was not a mistake. She said there was a strength in him that even the sharpest sword could not match. Though they shook their heads, she did not bend. In her heart, she believed her choice was not guided by chance, but by something greater. As the days turned to nights, and the city prepared for the grand ceremony of union, the kingdom waited. The people filled the streets with song and laughter, though beneath it all was a current of doubt. The queen stood unshaken, Daniel by her side, both watched and judged by countless eyes. No one knew then that the world was about to change, and that the quiet man who bowed before the queen carried a power that would astonish them all. The palace of New Avalon grew restless as the days passed. The great halls that once rang with music and laughter now carried whispers and uneasy voices. Knights sharpened their blades more often, advisors held longer meetings, and even the servants moved with nervous glances. Something dark was moving beyond the kingdom's walls. The news of machines roaming the far villages had become too strong to ignore. Fires burned in the distance, and families fled to the safety of the city walls. Queen Eleanor listened to her council as they argued in circles. Some urged her to send the armies to strike at the strange invaders before they reached the capital. Others begged her to strengthen the walls and prepare for a siege. Yet again, eyes turned toward Daniel Ward, who sat silently beside the queen. His calmness in the storm unsettled many. To them he seemed blind to the danger. One night, a tall man named Richard finally spoke his thoughts aloud. He said the queen's choice of Groom was a mistake. He said the kingdom needed a warrior at her side, not a man who lived in books and quiet rooms. His voice carried across the chamber, and others nodded in agreement. They wondered how Daniel could defend a throne when even their strongest swords might break against these iron creatures. Daniel did not respond with anger, simply looked at Richard and then lowered his eyes, as if deep in thought. The silence stretched, and for a moment it felt as though he would not speak at all. Then he said that courage was not only found on the battlefield, and strength was not always carried in arms. His words were soft but firm, and though many dismissed them, Queen Eleanor felt a weight in them that others could not see. Still, the doubts did not fade. As the days passed, Daniel walked the gardens of the palace, listening to the voices of the people who had gathered for safety. Mothers wept for their children, farmers worried for their fields, and soldiers whispered of battles they might not win. Daniel offered words of comfort, and though some listened, others looked at him with suspicion. They could not understand why the queen trusted him so deeply. One night, the queen and Daniel stood together on the high balcony overlooking the city. The torches below flickered, casting long shadows across the streets. The people slept uneasily, knowing danger was drawing near. The queen asked Daniel if he feared what was coming. He turned to her, his eyes calm, and said that fear was natural, but it was not the master of his heart. He told her that the world often tested those who carried unseen strength, and that their time of trial was close. The queen studied him in the torchlight. She had led armies, faced traitors, and ruled through storms. Yet there was something in Daniel's quiet certainty that even she could not explain. She felt both comforted and curious. She wanted to know what he hid, yet she trusted that he would show her when the moment was right. The council grew impatient. They urged the queen to choose another groom, one who could lead the kingdom in battle. They reminded her that the safety of New Avalon rested not only on wisdom but on strength. But the queen remained firm. She told them that a true ruler does not bend to fear or doubt. She told them Daniel was her choice, and she would not turn away from him. The tension in the palace grew sharper as word came that the machines were moving closer. Their heavy steps crushed the earth, and their glowing eyes lit the night. Refugees filled the city, their voices trembling as they described the destruction they had seen. The air itself seemed heavy with waiting, as though the walls of New Avalon held their breath. Daniel did not falter. He spent his days walking through the city, speaking with the people, listening to their fears. He spoke gently, reminding them that strength could take many forms, and that unity would give them more power than they realized. Some began to see him in a new light, though others still doubted. Not out of the question of his worthiness, followed him everywhere. The queen watched this with quiet pride. She knew the storm was close, and she knew Daniel would soon be tested. She had seen the shadows gathering at the edges of the kingdom. She had felt the air change, as though the world itself prepared for a clash unlike any before. And though the council whispered their doubts, she held fast to her faith in Daniel. She believed that within him was something the kingdom had never known, something that would astonish them all when the time came. The nights grew longer, the silence heavier, and the city waited. The queen and her groom stood together, alone in their certainty, while around them the court braced for war. None yet understood that the quiet man they doubted carried a power beyond their dreams, a power waiting for the moment it would be revealed. The morning of the ceremony arrived with skies heavy and gray. The people of New Avalon filled the streets, their voices loud with celebration, but their hearts uneasy with fear. The queen was to stand with her chosen groom, Daniel Ward, in front of all the city. Yet far beyond the gates, the ground trembled with the march of the machines. Their iron bodies glowed with fire, and their footsteps echoed like thunder across the earth. The day that was meant for joy was shadowed by the threat of destruction. Inside the palace, the great hall was lit with thousands of candles. Queen Eleanor stood tall, dressed in silver and white, her crown shining in the glow. Daniel stood beside her, calm as always, though many eyes burned with doubt. The court watched him, whispering to one another, waiting to see if he would falter. Some believed he would bring shame upon the queen, others hoped for a miracle. None truly knew what was about to come. As the ceremony began, a loud sound split the air. The walls shook, and the crowd cried out as the gates of New Avalon trembled under the force of the invaders. The machines had arrived. Their weapons burned, their heavy frames crushed the stones beneath their feet, and their advance filled the air with smoke and fire. Panic spread through the city as people screamed and rushed to safety. Soldiers raced to the walls, but even the strongest arrows and blades bounced off the iron bodies of the enemy. The queen did not move from her place. Her voice rang through the hall, commanding order, telling her people not to break under fear. Yet even her strongest knights looked uncertain. Their weapons seemed powerless, their courage shaken by the endless march of the machines. All eyes turned toward her groom. Daniel stood still, his face calm, his hands folded before him, as though he had been waiting for this moment all his life. One of the knights called out that Daniel should be taken away, that he could not protect the queen. But before any could move, Daniel stepped forward. His voice was clear as he told them not to fear. He raised his hand, and for the first time, the court saw the truth. A glow rose from within him, faint at first but growing brighter, until his whole body shone with a light that seemed both gentle and unbreakable. The hall fell silent as even the sound of the machines seemed to pause. Daniel walked toward the gates, and the queen followed close behind him. The people pressed against the walls to watch as he stepped into the open square of the city. The machines loomed over the streets, their weapons burning, ready to strike. Daniel raised his hand higher, and the air itself seemed to change. The iron monsters slowed, their glowing eyes dimmed and their weapons faltered. With a voice calm and steady, he commanded them to stop. To the shock of all who watched, the machines obeyed. The court gasped as the invaders froze in place. Their fires went out, their heavy frames stood still as though chained by an unseen hand. Daniel's eyes glowed with a strange power, and the people could feel the strength that flowed through him. He turned his head slightly, his voice carrying across the city, and told the people that they were safe. His power reached into the heart of the machines and bent them to his will. What had once been unstoppable now stood silent before him. The queen stepped forward, her eyes wide with awe. She had trusted in him, but even she had not imagined such strength. The people fell silent, staring at the man they had doubted for so long. Daniel stood tall, the glow around him fading slowly as the machines remained still. He had revealed his hidden power, a gift that no sword could match, a force that had saved them from ruin. In that moment, the doubt that had filled the palace began to vanish. The knights who had spoken against him bowed their heads in shame. The advisors who had urged the queen to choose another were struck silent. The people of New Avalon, who had whispered of weakness, now shouted his name with joy and wonder. They cheered for their queen and for her groom, the man who had stopped the iron storm with nothing but his will. The city, once filled with fear, now rang with voices of hope. Daniel had shown them that true power did not always come from the blade or the shield. It came from within, from a strength unseen, until the moment it was needed. The queen looked upon him with pride, knowing her choice had been right. Together, they stood before the people, united not only by love, but by destiny. And though the machines were silent now, all knew that the story of Daniel's hidden power had only just begun. The city of New Avalon stood in silence after the battle. The machines that had once filled the streets with terror now stood frozen. Powerless under the command of Daniel Ward, the people who had fled into corners slowly stepped back into the open. Their fear turned into awe as they looked upon the man they had doubted for so long. Daniel stood tall in the square, the glow of his hidden power fading from his hands. His calm eyes carried no pride, only a quiet strength that reached the hearts of those who watched him. Queen Eleanor moved to his side, her crown gleaming in the torchlight, her voice carrying across the city as she declared that Daniel was not only her groom, but also the protector of the kingdom. Her words rang with power and truth, and the people cheered. They shouted his name with joy, their voices echoing through the stone streets. Those who had doubted him now bowed their heads in respect. The knights, who had once questioned his worth, lowered their swords in honor. Even the advisors who had pressed the queen to choose another could not deny what they had seen. Daniel, however, did not bask in their praise. He looked at the frozen machines with thoughtful eyes, as though he could still feel the weight of their presence, knew that the battle was not truly over. What had been stopped today might rise again tomorrow, and the kingdom would need to be ready. When he spoke, his voice was steady, and he told the people that their safety did not rest on him alone. Told them that unity was their greatest weapon, that courage shared among many could outlast any enemy. The days that followed were filled with change. The people began to see Daniel in a new light. Children followed him in the streets, calling his name, while elders blessed him as he passed. Farmers brought him gifts of bread and fruit, and soldiers asked for his counsel before training. The queen watched with pride as her people grew to love the man she had trusted all along. The palace, once filled with whispers of doubt, now echoed with voices of hope. Daniel did not hide away in the royal halls. He spent his days walking among the people, helping rebuild the homes damaged during the attack. He lifted stones with his own hands, carried wood to repair roofs, and sat with those who had lost family to the destruction. His power had saved the kingdom, but it was his kindness that began to heal it. The people no longer saw him as an outsider. They saw him as one of their own. The machines that had been stopped were studied by the kingdom's scholars. They could not understand how such creations had been built or where they had come from. The knights wondered if more were waiting beyond the borders. The council urged the queen to prepare for another invasion. Fear still lingered, like a shadow at the edge of the light. Yet Daniel's presence gave them courage. He told them that knowledge was as important as strength, and that they must learn from what they had faced rather than hide from it. Queen Eleanor began to work with Daniel to prepare the kingdom for what was to come. Together they gathered the brightest minds from across the land. Builders, healers, and scholars filled the palace with new ideas. Daniel guided them with quiet wisdom, showing them how to use what remained of the machines to strengthen their defenses. Under his influence, the kingdom began to change. New tools were made, new ways of farming and healing were discovered, and the people found themselves standing at the beginning of a new age. Though the people celebrated, not all were at peace. Some feared that Daniel's power was too great, that no man should hold such strength. A few whispered in secret that he was dangerous, that his hidden gift might one day turn against them. These voices were faint but real, carried through the palace halls like a chill wind. Daniel knew of them, yet he did not answer with anger. He believed that time would show the truth, just as it had before. One evening, as the sun set behind the towers of New Avalon, Daniel and Queen Eleanor stood together on the balcony. The city glowed with lanterns, alive with music and laughter. The people below sang songs of hope, their voices carrying through the night. The queen looked at Daniel and told him that he had changed not only her kingdom, but also her heart. She said she had chosen him because she saw in him what others could not, and he had proven her faith true. Daniel smiled, his eyes calm as always, and answered that it was not power that made him worthy, but the trust she had given him. Without her faith, he said, he would have remained only a man of books and quiet thoughts. With her by his side, he had found the strength to become something more. The queen took his hand, and together they looked out over the city, their people united and strong. But beyond the walls, the night stretched dark and wide, and both knew that challenges still waited in the shadows. The dawn of a new era had begun, but the journey was far from over. The kingdom of New Avalon was filled with light and hope after the storm of machines had been stopped. The people believed they had entered a new age, one shaped by the wisdom of their queen and the hidden strength of her groom, Daniel Ward. The streets that once rang with fear now carried songs and laughter. Children played in the squares again, and farmers returned to their fields with new courage. Yet in the hearts of the queen and Daniel, they both knew this was only the beginning. Daniel continued to work beside the people. He walked the streets without guards, listening to the voices of farmers, traders, and soldiers. He joined builders in their tasks, helped healers tend to the wounded, and guided scholars as they studied the strange remains of the machines. His power had saved the city, but his kindness built trust that was deeper than fear or awe. The people began to see him as not only the queen's groom, but also as a leader in his own way. Queen Eleanor stood proudly at his side. She led her counsel with strength, her voice steady, but now she also leaned on Daniel's wisdom. Together they shaped new laws and ideas, ones that brought fairness and growth to all corners of the kingdom. Their bond grew stronger with each day, and the people saw in them a partnership that promised both safety and prosperity. Still, beyond the borders of New Avalon, shadows lingered. Messengers came from distant lands with stories of destruction. Strange machines had appeared in valleys and mountains, each more dangerous than the last. Some kingdoms had fallen under their weight, their people scattered. Fear once again spread, and even within the walls of New Avalon, some began to wonder if Daniel's strength could protect them forever. Daniel knew these fears, but he did not let them rule him. He told the people that power alone was not enough, that they must all rise together. He taught the knights new ways to fight, showed the builders how to shape stronger walls, and shared knowledge with scholars who worked day and night. The queen declared that New Avalon would not hide from the coming storms, but would stand ready to face them. The city became a place of learning and strength, its people united in purpose. As the days turned to weeks, Daniel felt his hidden power grow. It was no longer only a shield against the machines, but a force that seemed to reach into the very heart of the world. He could sense the rhythm of the earth, the hum of energy around him, and the quiet pulse of life that connected all things. He did not speak of it often, but the queen could see it in his eyes. She knew he was becoming something more than even he had imagined. One night, the machines returned. Their fire lit the sky, and their march shook the ground. The people gathered in fear, yet this time they did not run. They remembered what Daniel had done before, and they stood firm behind their queen and her groom. The knights raised their swords, the archers held their bows, and the people filled the streets ready to defend their home. Daniel stepped forward, his voice calm as he told them to stand strong. The queen stood beside him, her presence like a flame that would not be put out. Together they faced the enemy as the machines closed in. The air grew heavy, and the ground shook, but Daniel lifted his hands and released his strength. A great light burst forth, brighter than any fire, spreading across the city like dawn breaking through the night. The machines halted, their frames trembling under the force of his power. One by one their fires went out, their bodies collapsing into silence. The people watched in awe as the threat was ended, not with sword or shield, but with the will of one man who carried within him the strength of humanity itself. The cheers that followed shook the heavens, and the name of Daniel Ward was spoken with pride across the land. The days that followed, peace returned once more. The queen and Daniel walked among their people, their bond stronger than ever. They were not only rulers, but symbols of hope. Together they had shown that courage and wisdom could face even the darkest storms. The people of New Avalon believed now that no challenge was too great, for they had leaders who carried both the heart of love and the strength of destiny. As the sun rose over the kingdom, Daniel stood with the queen on the palace balcony. The city stretched before them, alive with voices and light. He knew more trials would come, but he also knew they would not face them alone. "Da!" The queen squeezed his hand, her smile warm and steady. And in that moment, Daniel understood that their story was not only about power, but about unity, trust, and the unbreakable spirit of humanity. It was not the end, but the beginning of a new era, one that would shine brighter than any before.